So this morning I'm joined by Nick, who's calling in from New Zealand, for this, the third in a series of interviews of those who have used brain retraining programs to recover from postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. Nick, thank you very much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
So Nick, take us back to life before you had POTS, and tell us about your story in the build-up to your diagnosis.
Sure, okay. So I guess I'll start back in probably early 2015. So at that point in life, I considered myself pretty healthy, full of life. I was very recently married in February 2015 to my wonderful wife, Kate. And we had recently just moved down to Hamilton, which is about a couple of hours south of the main city in New Zealand, Auckland. So I was going through a period of lots of changes. So I was having to sort of make new relationships, meet new people down here, and make new friends. So it was a bit challenging, and there was a bit of sadness leaving friends and family. I still obviously in touch with them, but it's not quite the same when you're 2 hours away. But yeah, trying to do my best to keep in contact with them. But yeah, as I said, a period of lots of changes going on, and I think, yeah, it was probably quite a stressful year, just with a lot happening, and I just started to notice a few symptoms start to sort of creep in about sort of June 2015. Some of the initial ones were just things like walking upstairs into work and feeling really puffed and being like, that's weird, like I'm not playing a whole lot of sport, maybe I'm unfit, but it was kind of strange, a bit lightheaded, things like that. I also started noticing things like light sensitivity. I was attending a course after work, so I'd work my 9-to-5 job, and then I went off to a course in the evening. And during that course, there was fluorescent lighting in the building, and we were watching a TV screen that was up on the wall, like quite close to where the lights were, and I just found it really exhausting watching the screen. I'm sure you know the feeling.
Yes.
Just a really uneasy feeling on my eyes and in my head, and yeah, I couldn't really explain it. No one else seemed to be struggling with it, and I kind of just pushed through it. But every evening I got home and I just felt absolutely exhausted from it. So those were sort of like the first, I guess, things that started happening that weren't quite right. And as I said, I was considered really healthy. When I went to fill in some health insurance forms a bit before that, I couldn't even fill them out because I didn't know who my doctor was. I hadn't been to a GP in 10 years. So yeah, I don't really just typically go to the doctor for whatever reason. I'd have to be pretty sick for me to end up in the doctors.
Yes.
So that sort of paints a little bit of a picture of where things are at. I can go into more of the build-up if you'd like to hear about it.
Yes, that would be interesting. I just briefly say that it reminds me of my own, because I also had this slower build-up. I know some people with POTS can get it overnight, but then others, it's a build-up and things progress, and that very much reminds me of my own case. But yeah, please do continue with the build-up
Cool.
into POTS. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that was very significant and major, and now in hindsight and after reading your book and things like that, I look back and go, maybe this was sort of like the real sort of traumatic or triggering event for me. It was this feeling of a tight throat.
Yes.
I'd actually heard about that in one of your other interviews. I can't remember. I think it was the first interview. The girl talked about that. I can't remember her name. But she explained that in hers, and I thought that was really interesting. But it's just it would come on randomly, often in the afternoons. Just this feeling of like a rubber band around my neck is probably the best way to explain it.
Okay.
and it would vary in how tight it was, and that was really scary because it felt like your throat was closing. Luckily, it never did, but it was very stressful. And I didn't know what was going on. I went to doctors, and they just put it down to allergies and gave me medication that didn't help at all.
So was there no obvious trigger to that, Nick? It just happened. Kind of, it seemed to happen in the afternoon.
I figured it out now. At the time, I had no idea, but I've put it down to dairy. So some reaction, maybe it's a mast cell attack or something, but
yes.
So I'm dairy free even now because I'm quite terrified of the feeling, so I try and avoid it. But at some stage, I really do want to sort of test it again and hopefully be eating cheese in Italy on my trip next year.
That sounds like a good plan, and one to aim for. And hopefully there's no further reaction from that. And it's interesting because you're right. Lindsay in that interview talked about that throat kind of seizing up, and a lot of people talk about that when they have these limbic system impairment. Everything seizes up, and it's terrifying, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there was one event which is really clear in my mind. I was at the supermarket shopping with my wife, and we going through the aisles shopping, and I started to get the light sensitivity thing really badly, and then the throat thing came on, and I just was having a freak out, and that was a real sort of panic attack moment. I'd never had anything like that before. My heart started to race like crazy, and I was sweating, and my throat was really starting to seize up, and I just had to get out of there. And I just said to my wife, "Hey, look, I'm going to go wait in the car." And she finished the shopping, and then we went home, and it sort of just sorted itself out after about half an hour. But it was really frightening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very scary not to be able to trust your own body when that kind of thing happens,
yeah.
Especially if it's the first time or the first major time when things are entering almost, you might say, sci-fi territory. It can be so weird what can happen in these circumstances.
Yeah, and with that tight throat thing came some really significant weight loss, because the last thing you feel like doing is eating when you've got throat issues like that happening very regularly. So I lost a significant amount of weight. I'm not a big guy anyway, so I sort of lost 7 or 8 kgs, which was pretty significant. Was it you? I think I saw a video of you, and you had something similar to that. Is that right?
Well, I certainly lost a lot of weight when I had POTS. I did have food sensitivities, but I still ate quite a lot. But it just didn't stay on. It just dropped. It all dropped away,
Right.
And that's another thing is that even when people can eat when they have POTS and they don't have food sensitivities, it seems to go one of two ways. Either they put on a lot of weight, or they can hardly put on any weight at all, and they can become very, very thin because your body isn't able to absorb things in that flight or fight state.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. And then on from that, I think I was incredibly stressed out from the throat thing, which was sort of happening most days in the afternoons. And then eventually I must have just sort of crashed, and I had probably 4 or 5 days in bed, just exhausted with fatigue, lightheadedness like I'd never really experienced before, sort of like flu symptoms, but I didn't have a fever. And that went on for about 5 days, and then I sort of recovered from it and started, I think we were on holiday at the time, luckily, and we went away somewhere, and I was feeling strange, but a lot better, but not right. And then I sort of just got stuck in that state of like not really better, but not on my deathbed, like, yeah. And then I just seemed to have all the typical sort of POT symptoms, like just ongoing fatigue and lightheadedness and IBS symptoms and things like that. Yeah. So it wasn't a fun time.
No, indeed. And so when was this at this point now? So this was still in 2015 that you were at
Yeah,
this
this is
stage?
really, so the throat thing went on for about 3 months, and during that time I was doing all sorts of diets and things, trying to figure out what was going on. And I think by the time I was hit with the POTS, other symptoms, I think I'd sorted out my throat because I'd stopped eating dairy.
Okay.
So I was really happy about that, but I still couldn't explain all the other crazy symptoms that I was having. Yeah.
Right. And when in and amongst all of these constellation of POT symptoms, great that giving up the dairy sorted out the throat at that point. When did you start to notice that your heart rate was much higher, and how did you come to find that, and what kind of heart rates were you experiencing?
So yeah, it sort of went. I did end up at the A&E a couple of times, just with a racing heart, and at the time I didn't know it was to do with posture, but I remember waking up one morning also having chest pain and having a shower, and then just taking my pulse because I felt really anxious, and it just racing, like, I don't know what it was, but it would have been at least 150 just having a shower. And then I just thought, man, something is not right. And we went to the A&E, and they couldn't really do anything. They just told me to relax, and they gave me some anti-anxiety medication, which helped a little bit at the time because I was incredibly anxious.
Yes.
So I was sort of sent home with that and not to worry, and told that just chill out and things should come right. And yep, the medication helped a bit, and it certainly settled me down for that day, but things were still not right. And yeah, I did notice my heart was often racing really fast.
Yes.
And then probably, yeah, and from there, I was just trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So I was on Google every day, Googling symptoms, as you're not really meant to, but what do you do? I was going to different specialists and doctors, naturopaths, osteopaths, had a CT scan of my sinuses and things like that. Everything seemed to come up clear. All the blood tests seemed to say I was pretty fine, and there was no real explanation. I think one of my GPs said I was experiencing vertigo. I guess I could have been some kind of vertigo anyway. Yeah.
Right, and that that feeling of having to look everything up, of course, is very understandable. It's something I had to do as well, because you aren't supported by it. It would be much more straightforward if someone was to say, well, you have this condition and here's what you do, and so on and so forth. And then you feel you don't have to look it up. But if no one's telling you what it is, then, and it's your life that's being affected, then you just feel this absolute need to get to the bottom of it. So when did you kind of then hear about the word POTS and about that?
Yeah, so yeah, I was mucking around in the garden at home, pulling out some weeds. At the time, I obviously felt healthy enough to do that. But when I was standing up, I was just getting these huge head rushes like I'd never had before, and I was just it was really strange, and I was almost blacking out every time I went from squatting to standing up. Very close. I've never actually fainted. To this day, I've never fainted, but I became so close to it while I was doing that. So then I started Googling those symptoms, and then POTS came up, and everything kind of just made sense straight away. All the symptoms seemed to line up. it was a relief in a strange way, because I think I'd been searching probably for 4 months, getting nowhere. I know that's probably a short amount of time compared to a lot of people who suffer for years without getting any kind of answers. But yeah, for me, 4 months felt like a lifetime. And yeah, it made sense. So I went along to my doctor and said, hey, look, I think I might have this thing called POTS. They hadn't heard of it. And I said, I need to see a cardiologist, because they're the ones who can diagnose it with the tilt table test. So they sent me to the local cardiologist, gave me the referral. The cardiologist, I think he had one POTS patient, but he certainly wasn't an expert in the area. And he put monitors on me, and had the monitors and the blood pressure, and he did find it very interesting. There were some rapid changes. He highlighted a whole lot of sections on the report showing that my heart seemed to have the ability to just double in speed instantly from when I was going from that squat to when I was standing up. So he was quite fascinated by that. And likewise, when I go from standing to a squat, the heart rate seems to just half its speed instantly. And then it sort of plays catch up over the next few minutes. But yeah, so he was reluctant to diagnose me, because he was Googling it in front of me. He didn't really have too much information on it, really. So he sort of just suggested, make sure you're having enough salt and fluid, and try and relax, and we'll see how you are in a couple of months. And yeah, we sort of left it at that. And I was not very satisfied with that answer. So I think I did see how things went for the next sort of few weeks, and then I wasn't seeing any real improvement. So then I decided to book in with the Auckland Heart Group, because that's where I found out from support groups that I was on that's where you go in Auckland to get diagnosed with POTS. So we're now in May 2016. So I think I started POTS in probably October 15. Went to the first cardiologist in about March, and then I finally got an appointment with the Auckland cardiologist in May. So that was it was good to go there. The cardiologist is called Fiona Stewart. She works with lots of POTS patients in New Zealand, probably the most well known. If you are part of the New Zealand support groups, everyone seems to go there. Yeah, really nice lady, and did some tests. She didn't see the need for a tilt table test at the time, even though I was adamant I needed one. She sort of said, "Oh, there's no point. I can see from just you lying to standing that your heart's increasing by 40 beats per minute." And she was happy enough with that to, I guess, give me a diagnosis of POTS. So yeah, that's when I got my official diagnosis. It would have been May 2016.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll pick up from that in a moment, but I just wanted to chime in and say that my own experience initially going to the GP was similar to your first experience with the consultant, where you're like, "Hi, I think I have POTS," and they're like, "What's that then?" And then they Google it in front of you, which of course very reassuring for you. But it's great that you found a consultant then who was really understood what she was doing in that field. And before we continue on from there, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the symptoms you were experiencing with POTS, one of the things that I talk about in the book and on the channel a lot, which I think is important for understanding it, not because it's a condition that is like anxiety, but can mimic it in some degrees, is that constant release of adrenaline, that sensation of that sort of feeling, because in POTS, my theory is anyway that often this constant release of adrenaline is caused by a physical trauma. That's the first trigger, in your case, I think that's bound up with several things, but it sounds like the throat sort of seizing up was a big physical trauma, and that can force the brain into sending, asking for adrenaline to be released a lot, which then, for various reasons, causes the difficulty standing up. Was that something that you experienced as part of the symptoms of POTS, that sense of adrenaline going off a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really good way to explain how you feel when you have POTS, I think.
Yeah.
And you feel it. I mean, yeah, you definitely, you feel like you're sort of out of control, and that there is this adrenaline running through you, but you got nothing, you can't do anything with it. And that's not sustainable. That makes you exhausted. Yeah.
Absolutely. It is not sustainable. We're not meant to have that happening 24/7. And for me, I don't know if it was for you, but for me, it was from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to sleep. It was coming all the time. It was, I think I calculated at one point, it was every 7 seconds I would get this release. Sometimes it was stronger than other times, particularly in the morning, for example, or just when I stood up. But it was always there. And was it constant for you? Was it never ending? Was there some break from it?
I think I certainly went through seasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I had POTS for about 18 months before I started to get recovery for it. And there were definitely good months and bad months. And there were times where I'd get up in the morning and I'd go for a walk and I'd feel quite good. And then I got back from the walk and everything went south again. But yeah, I can definitely relate to the adrenaline surges happening pretty constantly throughout the day, particularly throughout my whole time of having POTS. I did manage to keep my job, but I work from home 4 out of 5 days a week. So that was pretty much the only way that I could possibly do it. I look back now and I go, yeah, there's no way I would have been able to work a 5-day-a-week job in an office, having meetings, dealing with people 5 days a week. That would have been way too much. But my day in the office was always exhausting. It was always the worst day. The symptoms would flare. The adrenaline was just non-stop. Yeah, it was tough. And I would get home and I would need to recover. Yeah.
Well, I'm just flabbergasted that you were able to kind of, do that, and it's real testament to your character that you were able to keep that, job during that time, because it's a very, very, it's hard just to be alive when you have POTS. It's hard just to be alive. And life, it does take on a nightmarish kind of quality. I found, you wake up in the morning and you think, oh God, not this reality again. It's
yeah. And luckily I had quite understanding people in my job. They didn't really understand the condition, but they believed that it was a genuine illness and that I wasn't making it up, which was really helpful.
Right. Yes. And I think we're, although I think that POTS belongs to it's part of a constellation of illnesses that tend to be poorly misunderstood, and they're all very, very real. But at least in the case of POTS, we have a heart test, and heart rates don't lie. So that's something that I think can really has helped people see that this isn't, this can't be anything that's made up. Not that any of these sort of related conditions are; they're all very, very real. But it's easier to prove a heart rate that's very, very high than something like ME or CFS, which is devastating and I think overlaps with POTS often, but there's no official test for it.
Yeah.
And before we get back to your kind of picking up the story with the consultant and back to April 2016, do you think that you mentioned IBS, but do you think that there were overlapping conditions that you had? Because people with POTS often also, they're sensitive to, well, you mentioned sensitivity to light, they're often sensitive to chemicals, They can be sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies in some cases. They can have fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. Do you think there were other of those diagnoses that could have applied to you?
Yeah, look, I was never diagnosed with anything else. But yeah, I mean, there are overlapping things, and yeah, IBS was always a challenge for me throughout that time, for sure. And yeah, light sensitivity. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever had any issues around chemicals or anything like that, so I've been pretty lucky in that regard. But yeah, I was super sensitive to the light. Like, I couldn't watch TV or movies. It was, yeah, the adrenaline surges from that was just too much, and it was just yuck. Yeah.
Yeah. And the throat thing, which initially you maybe wondered if it could have been mast cell. Do you think the mast cell issues continued on in other forms, or do you think it was just related to the throat?
Yeah, I think it was mostly the throat. That was the main thing. I can't think of anything else that was significantly affecting me. No.
Okay, great. And it is interesting because any given person who's had POTS and you talk to them, the constellation is so unique to that person, and sometimes it's one set and sometimes it's another. Some people are very sensitive to chemicals, but not to light or whatever. It's hard to kind of pinpoint why that is, but it's clear anyway what kind of constellation you had. So then take us back to April of 2016. You've met this helpful consultant, and presumably you're given some sort of standard treatment for POTS, and pick up the story again from there.
Yeah. Okay, so the first approach was, look, some people seem to get better with this condition over time. So she was quite positive. She told me about lots of people who did seem to just get better over the years. So she was quite good at instilling some hope. But she did say, look, there isn't any known cure, and all medication is really trial and error, which is difficult. So we started off with, she just recommended me having this electrolyte drink, and making sure I got enough salt and water, like the other guy said, and putting on the weight, because I told her that I'd lost 7 or 8 kgs, and she thought that was very significant. So that was the focus after that appointment, putting the weight back on. So went away with my Gatorade type drink, which was helpful. I particularly in my days in the office, it seemed to save me in those periods of absolute exhaustion. So I was thankful to have that, but we still weren't really getting anywhere. Things continued. They seemed to get slightly better for a while, and then as the seasons go, they took a tumble for the worse, and I was spending more and more time lying in a hammock or in bed, working from my laptop, because it was just, not really making any progress. So I ended up going back to her after a few months' time. So this time she went, all right, we'll try some drugs this time. I'm going to prescribe you with Florinef. And she sort of said, yeah, looking at your results, I don't think it'll do anything, but we'll give it a go. And I'm a great believer in placebo, but that's not going to help if even the person prescribing me the pill is saying it probably won't help. So yeah, I took the Florinef for a few months and didn't notice any difference. So I ended up back there a few months later, and that time we tried Midodrine. Similar, didn't get any real improvement, and had some side effects from it. A lot of people described that funny feeling in their head or their hair, like it's sort of itchy. So it was quite a nasty sort of feeling that I got quite badly. So I wasn't a fan of Midodrine. And then I think I had booked in to see her again. Where are we now? Probably January 2017. went back to the same cardiologist the whole time, and this time she thought, all right, we'll try beta blockers now. So I was prescribed beta blockers, and I was waiting for them to arrive at the chemist. And during this time, the whole time really, I was always looking for answers on the internet, on YouTube a lot. And I came across a recovery story on YouTube of a guy called, what was his name? Jacob? I think it was Jacob. And he had POTS, and he was in hospital in a really, really bad way. I don't even know if he could talk. He was just not in a good way at all. The doctors didn't seem to know what was going on, didn't seem to be able to help him in any way, and I believe he was there for a number of months. And a lady made a video of her going to see him. Her name was Mel. She runs a brain rewiring program called The Switch in Auckland, New Zealand. And it was a video of her going to see this patient in hospital and just working with them, doing a few exercises with them. And he seemed to respond really well to it, just sort of like visualizations and a little bit of NLP type stuff. And she made some really good progress during her visits, and eventually he got to a state where he could go home. And then this guy went on her course called The Switch, or back then it was called something else, but now it's called The Switch.
Yeah.
And so The Switch is pretty much it's a 3-day course where they help you rewire your brain, really. Probably, I'll just read this out quickly because it probably sums it up better than I could. It was an email I got from them when I was inquiring about it. So they said, the key principle is your body is a self-healing mechanism when it's calm. But many people have become stuck in a stress response which depletes all the organs and doesn't allow healing. The course teaches you to understand the link between mind and body, and you learn techniques to calm your stress response and rewire your brain back into normal, healthy patterns. Your body can then activate its own healing. Around 90% of people who do the course are achieving spectacular results. It usually takes about 2 to 6 weeks to recover, though this can vary from 1 day to 1 year.
Okay.
Success depends on how open people are to the course and how ready they are for change and putting into practice the techniques. So it's pretty powerful stuff. I don't know too much about the DNRS. I've heard what you have to say about it, and it sounds like we're treating the same cause, or same root. It is about brain rewiring, retraining the limbic system, getting it out of that chronic state or hardwired state of fight or flight. So yeah, that's where I came across the course on YouTube. So I inquired about it straight away because I was just like, wow, that is amazing. This kid was in hospital, could barely talk. I mean, at the end of her video, he was out surfing. It was just like, wow.
Great.
And yeah. And on the video, I noticed that it was a Kiwi accent, and I went, that's in my country. That's amazing. So I got really excited about that, and inquired right away, and I went onto the waiting list for the course, and there was a 6-month wait. So yeah, that's where that journey sort of started for me.
Wow. Okay. Really cool. Well, great moment to hear that Kiwi accent. You know, that beacon of that beacon of hope. And I think that the switch sounds really interesting, and I think you're right. Like, it sounds like it's dealing with similar things to the DNRS or the Gupta program, or in Australia there's the autonomic nervous system rewire program. And I think that the thing about these programs is they're targeting the primitive brain, the really, really primitive brain, that limbic system, It's not like going to a psychotherapist where it can be a bit more rational, and you're kind of, or a lot more rational, and and you're sort of dealing with things in a higher order way. I think these programs really target the primitive brain in a way the primitive brain can understand, to help it get out of that state of trauma. And then of course that fits, just to go to link back to the start of your story, the traumas you experienced around the health problems with your throat, which are very traumatic experiences for anyone to have. I mean, it's terrifying. And then how that could flip your brain into crisis, and then you need something to help you get it out, and that seems to be where the switch is coming from, how traumatic events can tip our brain into crisis, and then how we can lift them back out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's really kind of exciting moment. So so at this point, you had 6 months to wait for the switch to kind of start, and you were. How did you go about preparing for that, or tell us about that 6 month period up to when you actually took the course then?
Yeah, so I inquired in about, I think it might have been late February 2017, sent an email and got the response saying, yep, there's a waiting list, about 6 months. But in the meantime, I did have to apply for it. So they don't accept anyone.
Okay.
So, and the reason for that is they only really want to work people who are determined to get well and actually believe they can get well. So it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Some people, I guess, they work with you and try and convince you that you can get well, but they won't accept everyone on the course. You really do need to go there with an open mind and a willingness to learn and to accept. Well, not accept, but I guess just be open to, yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. So in about, they sent you a booklet with a whole lot of sort of like success stories. So they really get your hope up about it, and to a place where you're like, wow, this is actually going to work for me. All these other people have got better. So why would I be any different? I should be able to get well too. There's people who have got better with POTS. They treat a lot of people with chronic fatigue. I think it's about 50% of the people that do the course.
Okay.
And then a whole lot of other conditions as well. I don't think they've done a whole lot with POTS, but they certainly have treated it, and I'm one of the newer success stories, I guess. So yeah, during that period in between, they send you a booklet to work through where you apply for the course, and then you have exercises to do that really just opens you up and starts to challenge your beliefs about health and restores that belief that you will be normal again, which is really important for the course, and just building that belief in you. And it was during that time that I came across yourself on YouTube, which was probably in, I don't know, maybe April, May. When did your book come out, Patrick?
April 2017, yeah.
Okay, I must have got it pretty soon after it came out, because I came across it. I think I came across you on YouTube first, and then went to Amazon and purchased the book because it looked very interesting, and it looked really sort of linked to the sort of program I was about to start. So I was really excited, and then I got your book in the mail in maybe May or June 2017. I can't remember exactly the date, but it was amazing just to read it. It just made a lot of sense, and I congratulate you on putting together such a just a good read. So easy to understand and follow, and it just makes so much sense. So yeah, I'm super grateful to you for writing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and it means a lot to hear that, because when I was sick with POTS, I really wanted when I got better, if there was a way of getting better, to write something that I wish I could have read when I was sick, that could have given me hope that there was a way out, there was an explanation, and also a way of bringing two worlds together. One being, people might say brain retraining, and then they think, oh, well, that's woo-woo, or that's alternative, and how does that relate to the science of what we know about POTS? But I think there are ways of bringing the two worlds together that show that this is not woo-woo or alternative, but actually it's the way out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So tell us what happened next then. Or if you want to add something on that too, but...
I mean, so I read your book in a couple of days, really excited, and it just gave me so much more belief that I was really onto something with this course I was about to start, because they were so closely linked, and I was just so happy to read your story and know that you had got better and that other people all over the world had got better using DNRS and other limbic system or brain rewiring programs. So it really was just that, just joy just to read your story and to watch your YouTube videos, just to know that this is actually going to work. I went eventually went along to the course, which was in September 2017. I think it got delayed another month because it was just such a busy waiting list, because everyone's, I think all chronically ill people should be doing this course in New Zealand. I can't go into too much detail about the course for legal reasons and things, but it really just challenges your beliefs and convinces you that you can get well and you can change the way your brain works. It is neuroplastic. It can change, and you learn, without going into detail, they teach you a process that if you can sort of repeat it enough and believe the process is working for you, eventually you're going to replace those dominant neural pathways with a new one that's healthy and better and can literally make you well in a few weeks if you stick to it and practice.
Yes.
So amazing stuff.
So then tell us about your actual process of recovery. Then you've done the course and you're doing the practices daily. How did things unfold for you?
So I think even from February, when I learned about it and started reading up on the course and doing the exercises there, I'd already made a huge improvement just because of my attitude shifting and my brain believing that I could get better. So that was already huge, just to sort of lift you out of that hopeless state.
Yes.
And I think I was gradually improving all the way from sort of March right through to September, where I started the course. And then when I started the course, you're in a group of sort of, I can't remember, maybe 8 or 10 people, and you're all sort of on this journey together, and you get inspired by each other, and you start to notice changes in other people, and then that inspires you, and then you start noticing changes in yourself even after the first or second day. Like, just your mood is so much better, that it's sort of adrenaline is no longer feels like it's pumping into your body. And I feel like by the end of day 3 of the course, I was significantly improved.
Amazing.
Still not right. We hadn't really fully, I guess, given time for that part of the brain to heal, but I was in such better spirits and was genuinely feeling quite a lot better. And after that, it was really just setting aside time to just cement it. So whenever you feel the symptoms, you go and do the switch on it every time. So if it was 20, 30 times a day, you do it 20 or 30 times a day. Whenever you notice symptoms coming on, you do a switch and you change it. And it was just that constant repeating of that over time that eventually was strong enough to, I guess, make that new wire.
Yes. Yeah, the new pathways that become the dominant
Yeah,
ones, and as you put it
yeah,
nicely, that get cemented,
yeah.
in. And so for you then, a few things there. First of all, I was really interested when you said that even over the period of time at the course, the sense of the adrenaline getting fired off was dampened very, very quickly, because that was my experience as well doing the DNRS. It was certainly within the first week, but to be honest, it could have been like within days 2 or 3. It just suddenly, I've been doing the practice for a few hours every day, and my stomach was quiet on the evening of the second or third day, and it wasn't churning. And it had been churning for years, and and I had been practicing meditation intensively in the months previous, thinking this has got to be something flight or fight. Meditation is meant to help you, blah blah blah, and it didn't speak to the primitive brain in the way I needed, and suddenly it switched off. So it sounds like you had a similar experience in that it actually became quiet quite quickly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it really did. I mean, during the course, I guess you're on a bit of a high, I guess, and it kind of distracts you from that maybe, and because you're not focusing on it, and the course is constantly challenging you to focus on the positive rather than body scanning for the sick feelings. So yeah, it really just eased so much instantly. And then you go home, and it did come back, but that's when you really need to put into practice what you've learned.
Yes, yes. And so for you then, how long did you do the practice for? How many weeks or months did you need to commit to it?
I'd say I was doing it multiple times a day for the first few weeks. Initially, probably upwards of 20 times a day.
Okay.
And then it sort of just diminished over time to now. So after a couple of months, I was probably doing it once a day because I didn't need to, and it was a fast recovery, really. I mean, yeah. But as I said, the recovery for me really started back in February when I started learning about it and reading your book, and yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's one. Well, I think it is this amazing thing about when you start finally to target the root cause, how quickly things can shift around. Sometimes it does take longer for some people. It depends on all kinds of factors, but it can also start to shift really quickly, and can feel, given where you were at, it can feel like a miracle. Now when I look back at the different Patricks that existed when I had POTS and then when I started to recover, it's one of the most extraordinary feelings, really, to experience, and it must have been such a wonderful, feeling for you too, to kind of just for this to unfold in this way. I mean, I don't know if magical is too strong a word, but how would you describe that from an emotional point of view? That recovery.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Like, so fast. It's kind of like, is this real? Like, am I really going to wake up tomorrow and be fine, or am I just going to be like in a completely crap state like I was 6 months ago? But it was pretty consistent. You had your odd day where you'd have to work much harder, but it was, such a significant improvement, and it was just feelings of pure joy, just to know that this is working, and I'm already sort of 70-80% there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're out of the woods, it makes a big difference, doesn't it, as well? Because you're you can trust your body a lot more. Even if you have that bit of percentage to go, you're not in panic land. And
Exactly.
and the other thing there is, okay, you're feeling physically a lot better. Obviously, you're feeling emotionally optimistic and better. What about concrete evidence, as it were, or your heart rate going down, light sensitivity returning to normal, those kind of things, which the data on which can't lie, as it were. So how about that side of things during your recovery?
Yeah, so everything pretty much improved. Light sensitivity is no longer an issue. My wife and I can now go to movies and it's fine. It's like we didn't really do that for 2 years. It was so weird, not being able to just go and see a movie, or had no social life during that 2 years either. So it was so cool just to be able to reconnect with friends and be able to go and meet new friends as well, and not be so restricted by having to lie down all the time, or just having no energy, or really wanting to meet new people because you just don't have the capacity to do it. So having that energy back was just amazing, just to be able to be back to your old self. And it has been difficult being in a new city, being sick, and not really, like, we did meet people before I got sick, but maybe not for quite long enough to cement really good relationships with lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's just been awesome being able to do that freely without worry, or going over to someone's house but then lasting 5 minutes and then going home to lie down. Yeah, it's just, life just becomes so much easier.
It is, and it's something else about that, isn't it? Because when you're in that state of the desperate, POTS state, your body is always giving you these danger signals, and so you feel out of control because you want to fix it and you can't, and it's terrifying, and you just don't know. You're going to go somewhere. Are you going to collapse? Can you do X? Can you do Y? It's non-stop, isn't it? And then suddenly that all disappears. And so you no longer have that sense of being out of control, and it's terrifying, and all those sort of other aspects to it, which
I don't have to plan going out.
Exactly, you don't have to plan going out. Whereas if someone was giving you psychological counselling, let's say, if you have the illness, it'd be about how can you cope with feeling out of control, or how can you plan around this, and all these things you'd have to do. And now all of a sudden, none of it is necessary, because it's. I don't know if you had this experience, but it's like you forget that you ever even had the illness, in a sense. Not that you're not grateful for recovering, but it just disappears because it's not because it's stemming from the primitive brain. The primitive brain gets corrected, and then it's less apparent to you because it's okay then, there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and in terms of the heart rate, that also improved.
It's very much under control. I mean, I made a point during the course that I wasn't going to get caught up on things like heart rate, so it's not something I really tested after the course for months.
Okay.
And that was quite intentional.
Yeah.
So actually, just before I did a test myself, because I thought, you'll probably ask me that in this interview, and I hadn't done it in so long. And I was lying down, and my heart was 70 beats per minute, and then I stood up and it went to 82, and that just, wow.
That's 150% normal. So
yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so it's just beautiful, because you think of someone you had a heart rate of 150. I mean, that, which is off the Richter scale for you're just pottering around, standing up, and then suddenly it's back down to normal like that. How amazing it is when you correct the underlying mechanism, how everything can heal back up. All those blood vessel problems that happen in POTS, which I go into in my book and so on, but they cause the elevated heart rate. They can all heal back up, and 82 that's that's all normal. It's just wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So you were just saying that you thought it might have gone up by a bit more, but it was all good.
Yeah, it was great. It was, yeah, increase of 12.
Yeah.
Can't complain with that.
You cannot. That's called being POTS free. So are you? I don't know if you were into sports very much beforehand, but are you back exercising? Or going to the gym or something like that, or is that something that you've
So
picked back up?
yeah, I wasn't playing any sport before. I mean, I have in the past.
Yeah.
Probably not the biggest sporty person, but that is sort of like where I'm at now. I'm just starting to. We have a dog, so that keeps me pretty busy, and she needs a lot of exercise. So I walk her. So I'm just starting to think about running. So that's sort of my next stage. Yeah, I mean, I should be. It's been sort of 10 months since the course, so yeah, I'm definitely ready. I'm just haven't haven't really got into that yet, but I'm absolutely ready for it. So yeah, no excuse really.
Well, that's awesome, and I think it's also really encouraging for people who are listening to this that actually you recovered from POTS without doing any major exercise.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so important because people, for me, it's such a tragedy that people who are very, very sick, are being told that they're very unfit, and that's the reason for their problem, and then they're given these exercise protocols, when actually it's so hard. Like when you're in this flight or fight state and your nervous system is just overpowered, exercise is such a massive stressor. So you add that into the mix, and all of a sudden people they crash and they get much worse, and all kinds of things can happen. And I've met some people or talked to some people who have POTS, and pre-brain rewiring. They're probably amongst the fittest people I know, in a sense, or they're very pretty fit, but they still have a heart rate of 120, 130, something when they stand up, because it's not about unfitness, lack of fitness. So I think that your story really speaks to that, and could give people hope that they don't have to go down that route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I always encourage to get outside and to walk. That's all I ever did throughout my illness, because that's all I really could do. I mean, I didn't get really into the recumbent bikes or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, I did do a little bit of stuff, but it was mostly just sort of 10-minute walks with the dog. That was sort of all I was really doing throughout the whole time. And now I just do longer walks, and that's all I've ever done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not too dissimilar in that regard. And I think that actually, when you're recovering from an illness like POTS anyway, walks and gently pottering around the garden are much better things to be doing. It's a devastating illness. It's not something to you don't want to be a hard taskmaster with yourself in how you get out of it.
Yeah.
So, looking back over everything now, like, what would be your takeaway points for people if they have POTS and they're watching this? What would be your take-home message to them? What would be your encouragement to those watching?
Yeah, I think there's a real, like, in the POTS and dysautonomia community. I know because I've been there myself. There's a real, like, you don't want people to tell you it's all in your head. That is the worst thing you could tell someone with POTS. They don't want to hear it. But at the same time, they get so, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people just get so focused on all the physical symptoms and the heart rate and the blood pressure and all the lightheadedness, the light sensitivity, on all those physical symptoms. And like you were talking about in your book, they're not focusing on the full elephant.
Yes.
They're yeah, and you can get like I got obsessed with all these symptoms and what they could mean, and the limbic system, it explains everything. I mean, dysautonomia is a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. It's literally what it is. So clearly there's something in the brain that isn't functioning correctly. How do we correct that? And that's what these courses do, like the DNRS or the switch or all those others that you've mentioned. So I just want to encourage you, they work. Like, what have you got to lose? They actually get to the root cause. I'm absolutely convinced. And yeah, I just get really excited when I hear recovery stories, and I'll just encourage anyone who's suffering with POTS, dysautonomia, and other conditions too, like chronic fatigue. I personally believe that a lot of these have the same root cause. So get the help. Do the work. Do the course.
Yes. Perfect. Well, thank you, Nick. And now you're living testament to that, the same processes of recovery. You've managed to do that, and now your story can also inspire others, and get them excited in the same way that this devastating condition can have finally an explanation. As you very eloquently put it, also it is kind of already in the name of dysautonomia, but that hasn't been explored for whatever reason by researchers. But I just want to thank you very much for sharing your story today with everyone on this channel, and to provide a beacon of hope that POTS recovery is possible, that there is an explanation, and yes, for explaining your story so very well. So I want to thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me, and it's a joy to talk to you, and I'm really rooting for your book, and if there's anything I can do to help spread the word more, I'll be happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you, Nick. And I hear you're off on holiday. Is that right? Next next year. So that sounds like it's going to be a great celebration.
Oh, absolutely. We're planning a big trip overseas. I haven't really travelled too much before, so certainly was not in a position to be able to travel or go on planes a year ago. So now I'm just so excited. My wife and I can go to Europe and maybe go to the UK. Might even end up in Ireland. We'll see.
There's definitely a lunch on me here if you can make it. So. So
thanks, Patrick.
it would be a great pleasure. So we can wrap things up there. But I just want again just to thank you very much for sharing your story, and it's one of great inspiration. From bedbound to traveling the world before too long. So just well done, Nick, and thank you.
All right, thanks for having me. Cheers.